Today, young chess masters,
Hello.
let's talk about where to attack. We all like to attack, I don't have to ask you that. But where do we go about doing the attacking? Well, we're going to focus on three main concepts. Number one, where your pawns are pointing. Number two, the location of the enemy king. And three, the location of your pieces versus your opponent's pieces. These are all factors that I take into consideration when I'm getting ready to attack. Also, a bit of a warning, this comes with a little bit of experience. The more games you play, the more natural figuring out where to attack is going to feel. Take a look at our chessboard here. This is a rather advanced opening that I love to play as black, although to be honest with you, white scores pretty well too. This is called the King's Indian Defense, and what I'd like to focus on is the placement of the pawns. Take a look at white's really long pawn chain. In fact, I drew an arrow on the screen, and that's what I want you to think of also. When you've got a long pawn chain, this serves as an arrow. It actually shows you which way you should be attacking. And if we look at black's position, do you see a pawn chain making an arrow also? Well, I bet you do. Starting up here on c7 and landing on the square f4, he has a pawn chain as well. In openings like this with long pawn chains, those pawns tell you which way to attack. White is going to be attacking on the queen side because his arrow points that way, and black's going to be attacking on the king side. In fact, this is the most dramatic example I could think of because the next 5 or 6 moves for each side are all on the side of the board that they're supposed to be on. For example, a very common idea by black is to play the move g5. Here he comes. And then white might put his rook on the c file to get ready to play c5. And here comes black. And here comes white getting ready to play c5. And then black brings more pieces over. And then white plays a move like b4. And then black plays knight to g6. And white finally crashes through, and so does black. And the game continues in a very interesting manner. Who's going to win the race? Is white going to break through on the c file first? Or is black going to break open the white king? And is his attack going to come first? Well, if I knew the answer to that, we would always play either the white or the black side, but that's what makes openings interesting. Depending on how both sides play, sometimes white wins the race and sometimes black does. But in this case, the pawn chains are pointing you which way to attack. Take a look at our next chess position. We have another famous opening. This is called the Sicilian Defense Yugoslav attack. Yugoslav, what is that, a car? No, it's actually a country, but 99% of the people listening to this video were not alive when it was a country. Now, it's 7 little itty-bitty countries, and in fact, we're showing them to you on the screen right now. Fun Master Mike's been to them all, and they're all lovely. But let's get back to chess. The second point I wanted to make was you need to attack depending on where the kings are. For instance, if your opponent leaves his king in the middle, and you are castled, guess what? You should attack up the middle. In this case, the kings are castled on opposite sides of the chessboard. So now we're not focusing on our pawns, we're focusing on the kings. Notice white's pawns here are actually aiming at the queen side, but that would be a huge mistake to attack on the queen side because you'd be opening up your own king. So in this case, white's going to be attacking on the right side, the king side, and black's going to be attacking on the queen side, the opposite of our first position. So a typical move for black is to play rook c8. That just makes sense. He has a half-open c-file, and that rook, even though there's a bunch of pieces in the way, is thinking about getting to the white king. Now white tends to save his bishop here by bringing it back, because we all know loose pieces drop off, and that bishop on c4 was a loose piece. Now black might play the move knight to e5 to clear out his black rook. And then white goes on the attack, h4. He's going to throw open the h-file because he needs an open line to attack also. Now sometimes black plays knight c4, and white has to get rid of that knight. It's too annoying.
Ow.
And then white goes ahead and plays h5. I know black's attacking that pawn twice, but it's so important for white to attack on the king side, he's even willing to sacrifice this pawn. Now if black takes it, white might play g4 to force that knight back to the square f6. Of course, white could go for a really quick checkmate with a move like queen to h2, but that's generally a mistake. Even though it looks like this queen and rook battery is going to do some damage on h7, white would first have to get rid of this knight. And with the move knight to d5 coming for a little remove the guard tactic, Black has this fascinating idea of sacrificing an exchange just because it's so important to attack on the queen side. Rook takes c3, forcing pawn takes, and then Black keeps bringing pieces over to the queen side, and in fact, I don't mind Black at all. It's going to be really hard for White to break through this pawn. Notice the move pawn to g5 would be stopped by the move knight to h5, blocking the h-file. On the next turn, rook to c8 is coming, and Black is doing a pretty good job of attacking on the side of the board where the other person's king is.
Yeehaw!
So, don't forget king location when you're deciding which way to attack. Our final example is this one. Why am I showing you this one? Well, it's actually a real game that Funmaster Mike played. Now here, we're both castled on the king side. And also, I'm not really going to focus on the pawn structure here. My long pawn chain is pointing toward the queen side, but I want us to pause before continuing and look at the minor pieces. Notice that 1, 2, 3 of my minor pieces are on the king side. And notice that 1, 2, 3 of his minor pieces are on the queen side. In fact, they're really far over. So, when you've got a chess position where one color pieces are all on one side of the board and yours are all on the other side of the board, you should probably attack on the side of the board where your army is. That just makes sense. Here, I played a really great move. In fact, it's the only move I've ever played that I know of that's been printed in a chess book, so I'm very proud of it. I played this move f4. Now it looks like two pawns are waiting for me. It also looks like I just gave away my e-pawn. It turns out no matter what White does, he's in for a little bit of a headache. For instance, if he takes this pawn here with his bishop, well, I could play knight takes d4 with a discovered attack and I'll be able to pick off his bishop with my queen. But I had a fancier move. I was going to play knight to g5 to double attack this bishop. And if he runs away, let's say to the square g2, I was going to hit him with f3. Uh-oh, that bishop has to go back to h1, and I would get to play knight to h3 mate. You can imagine I was really looking forward to playing this. Instead, after the move f4, he took with his pawn, I took with one of my knights as a sacrifice, and after capture, even though I'm down a knight, it's actually really hard for him to deal with the idea of queen to g5. I'm not going to show you the entire game, that would take too long, but I'll just show you one pretend example. Let's say he plays the move queen to c2, with the idea of defending on the second rank. My plan was to play the move queen to g5 anyway, threatening mate. He's got to play f3 to defend, but now I play this move e3. And no matter what he does, I'm going to play the move e2 on the next turn. That's called obstruction, because I'm obstructing the queen's ability to defend the bishop. For instance, if he plays knight to c1, I'd play this move anyway. And of course, if he takes, I can just give a checkmate, because his queen's not defending anymore. If he tries a different move, let's just say he goes on the attack himself, plays a move like c5, I'm going to play e2, and when his rook moves up to defend the checkmate, of course I have this fork, knight to h3, winning an entire rook. So boys and girls, the three main things to think about when you're figuring out which way to attack. Are your pawns pointing one direction? Is the enemy king in a particular location? And are all of your minor pieces clustered on one side of the board? Take some practice, but if you think about those three elements, you'll be a much better attacker.